Hey everybody, welcome back to Shoenn with Jude, part 2 of episode 3. Your horse needs more jumping jacks. Speaking with Dr. Tim Worden, and this part will pick up talking about professionals, um, some of the differences in maybe their training. Tim has really researched a lot of top show jumping people. He's actually put out a bit of a book or pamphlet on some of the training techniques and the differences or the theories that some of these top riders have. Additionally, he'll talk about the amateurs. Is are these changes in training, introducing velocity and that type of work into the day-to-day training being passed down to the amateur riders under these professionals. And then we'll sort of segue into programs, podcasts, research, information that people are trying to get out there about the equine industry and whether or not there's an awareness or support insofar as funding for these different endeavors. One of the things that I've experienced just lightly getting into research and exploration as it relates to some farrier, what we do as farriers, our interventions, and the impact it has on the foot. It's sort of a wide open field of research exploration. Yes, there are people out there doing good work, veterinarians, people affiliated with different universities, and more that's growing. But the reality is that we're severely behind in comparison to the thoroughbred racing industry. That a lot of the research, a lot of the funding goes to those things. So appreciate you being here. As always, I'm told if you don't say anything, people don't do it, but please like and subscribe. Share these videos with other people. I really have been energized by getting out there, talking to people in the industry at all levels of the industry. I hope to continue to bring more type of videos and information like this. My goal is eventually do some of my day to day, the theory, the thought process, and how I address certain feet, when I address certain feet, why I address certain feet a particular way. So that's all in the plan and in the works for this. So appreciate you being here and enjoy part 2 of episode 3, Shoenn with Jude. Thanks for being here. You've observed and written about top professionals and their training regimens. Is there anything about their programs that are in line with today's thoughts on equine fitness differently than years ago?
So a really good question. I think that it a little bit aligns with some of the stuff I said earlier. I think you're starting to see like those really top programs rely a bit more on speed work is number one. Like I think most people now at the top of the sport are taking their horses out and galloping them, or at least getting them up to a pretty good speed, or they compete enough and they're getting into jump offs enough that maybe that's where that training stimulus is coming from. I think again, a lot of those top programs are focusing more on the welfare side. Like there's really cool research coming out of France right now, again, in racehorses, but you can apply it to any discipline, I think. Looking at, the horses that are consistently performing well in competition, in races, they tend to come from environments that have a little bit more of a focus on the welfare. So ensuring, turnout quality is high, good access to, or good sight lines to see stable mates. The horses have all those pieces in life.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, a bigger focus on stress in horses and appreciating that your goal as a trainer is essentially to be a stress manager. So you want to think about all the things that are potentially stressing your horse and you want to mitigate those. So whether it's, respiratory health or, being separated from certain horses at the time of day they go outside and ensuring that's comfortable for the horses. Yeah, like I think there's a lot as well. Like bloodlines are for sure changing. Like I'll just speak to jumping, but as there gets more and more thoroughbred blood coming back into these jumping horses, I think that these top programs, what they do so well is they're quicker to adapt their training programs. So you're not seeing as much, or you're seeing more autonomy given to these top horses now, I think, than you maybe would have seen 15 or 20 years ago. And the rider's learning to work more with the horse as opposed to, the rider being the person who dictates everything. The horse is just responsible for, carrying out those actions. I think it's a lot more of a connection now, and just figuring out, how do we get these horses to understand the jumps in front of us, to understand the tasks, and then giving them a bit of freedom to solve them,
Yeah.
to solve it in their own way.
Are they? Do you know of where? So when you talk about the velocity and increasing sort of the workloads and stuff like that, are they using heart rate monitors? Are they using sensor technology or stuff developed for the apps to sort of measure what
Yeah.
they're doing in these workouts?
Yeah, so I think that some riders are starting to use some of those wearables. Um, I think at this stage, it's a lot more just prescribed type work. So just over years of experimenting, they maybe have different, high intensity interval training protocols that they'll use with their horses, and then they'll experiment with each individual horse to say, is this horse completing this protocol too easily, or is it too difficult for the horse? And then from that baseline, they decide if the horse does more or less work, and how often. Uh, but yeah, I think there are for sure some that are using wearables like the Alogo Move Pro device that does give some really helpful information about jump trajectory, any sort of balance issues the horse may have, and just it's a really nice way of quantifying each workout. You know how much time the horse spent going certain direction, left walk, trot, or canter. It's just a really nice way to quantify the exact workload, so you can begin to tweak things, especially if you have different riders on the same horse.
So along the lines of like the professionals and how they've amended their programs to incorporate some of the newer thought, do you think that's passed on to the amateur riders?
I think it really depends on the environment the amateur is in. I think that there are some stables that really do focus on horsemanship and teaching the next generation of riders, this is the current best practice, this is the current evidence base that we're using, but we'd like to see it, evolve, and these are the things that we're doing to innovate and to move things forward. Conversely, I do think there are a lot of programs out there where innovation and growing the evidence base isn't at the forefront of the program. It's really just about, we're going to do the same thing this year that we did in 2015, that we did in 2005. Maybe there's a new bit or a new piece of equipment we're using, but essentially same program that we're just recycling every year. And for me, like, that's a little bit sad, because I think the goal of sport should always be to innovate. That you should never have the same program year after year. You're always getting better. You're always learning. Maybe you get lucky one time and there's a certain protocol that you think is perfect, and you can keep it and you do recycle it. But I think for the most part, the horses are constantly changing. We're constantly learning what's best for each horse. There's always new research coming out. And so, like, those programs should constantly be evolving. And my hope is that there are programs out there that are really focusing on passing that along to their athletes.
This is a bit of a long-winded question, but do you believe and/or do you have any examples of a horse that you have created tailor-made exercise fitness training programs, monitored and noted their progress, which has shown meaningful improvement versus examples that follow the old standard routines, 30 to 45 minutes of work, X minutes of walk, X minutes of trot, cool down, walking out a horse 15 minutes and call it a day? Like if you're looking apples to apples, would you say some of the things that you've instituted with people that you've worked with have had success versus maybe the same quality or same type or same level of horse where they haven't incorporated sort of this newer performance driven technology?
So often when people approach me, it is because they do have some issue and they've hit a bit of a roadblock, and they've exhausted to an extent like all of the resources in their immediate network, and they're looking for another solution. So I think in that way you are a little bit able to compare like the old school of training versus maybe some different approaches, just because like they've been a little bit stuck at least in their current program, and they're looking for some suggestions. And I think in those cases, like there are always things that have a quicker response and a stronger response than others. But sometimes horses that are rushing fences, that can just be easily solved by putting the horse in a bit of a simpler environment for a while. So making sure that you're using jump materials that are colored in a way that the horse can easily contrast the jump with the surrounding. That gives them a bit more confidence that it's what it's seeing is correct. The same thing with like how you're building it, like giving it a bit more structure and contrast, just so the horse again is a little bit more comfortable and like a bit more confident that what it is seeing is actually correct. Because I think a lot of times like those stress issues are coming back from a bad experience where the horse misread something, something startled it, uh, and now it doesn't really trust where its body is anymore. The same thing with like building very inviting and easy to accomplish quote unquote lines where uh, you want to make sure that like the horse isn't having to adapt its body so much. Like if it's a horse that needs a bit more room at the base of the jump, they're giving it that room just to build that confidence again. And I think like for me, ultimately, you want to talk to who you're working with, the rider, learn as much about the horse as possible. And you're just trying to figure out like what's going to make that horse confident. Because as soon as the horse has confidence in its abilities again, like whether that's building jumps a certain way or, going out and like galloping it or doing certain strengthening exercises just so it feels good in its body again, it feels the power there. Like once you have that, then it becomes a lot easier to train. But you just need to be a bit more mindful and a bit more methodical at the start to experiment with different exercises and training means, figure out what the horse needs, what it's responding well to, and then once you have that, then you can sort of progress things much more quickly and get them back to where it needs to go. But ultimately, yeah, like I'm a big video guy. I do a lot of video, and there's certain programs online where you can compare, before and after videos, build the same types of exercises, make sure the rider's giving the same ride and look to see like is the horse using its body differently? Is it, maybe attacking the jump a bit more carefully? And like once you have that, then I think you're good to go.
In chewing, we talk about changing a foot over a period of time. When you take over a new horse, it takes about 3 months, and then we have like a colloquial thing where it becomes your horse. You know, what would you say? Is there a duration of time in fitness with horses where, yeah, after 30 days, after 60 days, after 90 days, you institute these different changes, you're going to see a market difference in physical ability and muscling, like along those lines. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on, I guess, the issue the horse presents with. So I think anything where the horse is maybe questioning reading certain jumps, that always takes longer. Like, I think the neural component's always a little bit slower to bring along just because you need to be more patient. You need to spend more time in very simple environments to build that confidence back up and to get the horse back feeling comfortable. Other things like, if you feel like you're lacking a little bit of power from behind or the horse isn't comfortable with speed, like oftentimes like that doing hill work or speed workouts, those changes start to appear much more quickly. But yeah, it just depends on sort of where the horse is now and where it needs to go. Other things like, if it's maybe not the correct bit for the horse, like it's a bit the horse really doesn't like. Again, like if you can swap out to something a bit simpler, the horse gets a little bit more comfortable with what's in its mouth. That can again be a pretty quick change. Things like certain things the rider may do, like throw their body at the base, that as well. Like if you can get the rider to be a bit more patient, wait for the horse to come up and meet their body at takeoff. Like that's something again, like not an easy fix, but it's a relatively small fix. And like if the rider can nail that, then it's again something that can unlock, more potential in the horse almost immediately.
Okay. Last question. You had a great podcast with Nicole Lakin. I was grateful enough to be included on two occasions. I mean, really informative. You had people all different walks of life and levels within the industry. And then there was an eventual decision on your guys' part because there's costs involved with producing this stuff to sort of stop doing the podcast in an industry that's really like arguably some of the most affluent people in the world, and everybody's been blessed and fortunate to sort of find their way here through hard work or whatever the case may be. What do you feel like these endeavors, an endeavor like your podcast, just can't seem to get support. Even research related projects for equine related studies has a difficulty finding funding.
Yeah, so we were very, very fortunate to run that podcast for 2 years, and it was interesting. Like, we always got feedback from different listeners from different walks of life, and a lot of the listeners tended to be, those people who had one or two horses of their own. They're trying to do the best they could by those horses, young professionals as well, and like grad students, and that was sort of the demographic, which tends to not be the people at that stage in their lives who have the financial means to contribute to things like sponsoring and podcasts and funding research. I think that when you consider, the people who go to big shows and hang out in the VIP tents and stuff, it's interesting because when you talk to them, they often talk about, the horse world as a bit of an escape for them. Like, they're working incredibly hard in their regular jobs, and these positions have allowed them to have, the lifestyle that they do have. And I think often, like, when they get to the barn, like, again, it's an opportunity for them to disconnect, to spend time with horses, to experience that whole lifestyle, which is so different than maybe the stress they're at the 9 to 5. And I think for them, it's often probably not, top of mind to think about, what innovation needs to take place here and like how does the sport need to grow. And I think as well, they sometimes lean on, the stables, so the trainers and the riders, to help guide them as to, what is important and where should they spend some additional resources to make sure their horses are performing at their best. And so I think it really comes down to targeting those trainers. And you see it a little bit in the thoroughbred world, right? Where one trainer adopts, sports science, or one trainer brings on a full-time nutritionist or whatever. And then almost immediately they do have increased success because, like, now they have this additional input. And I'm not saying that every horse needs it, but it's just about giving the trainer, who's the subject matter expert, a little bit of extra information on, maybe if you make this tweak with this horse, you can unlock a little bit more. And those are things that were previously missed. And then once you have that initial trainer who's sort of a trailblazer and they have success, then you see everyone else sort of jump on board. And so we really need to find trainers who are, enthusiastic about research. They see the potential in it, and they know that, if I engage researchers or if I go out and look for some additional information, there's probably, a little bit here that will maybe get me, a few extra placings throughout the year, or it's the difference between me coming third or me being the fastest in the jump off. And then once they're comfortable with that and they bring someone in having that success, then everyone else will jump on board. So I think we're really just like any other sport. There's always going to be that early adopter who jumps on board and has that initial success. And we're just a little bit in the Olympic disciplines. We're just waiting for those people right now. Like, there are a few riders who are working more closely with researchers, and I think you're starting to see the impacts and the benefits of that. But it's just not a widespread um, initiative at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, horse racing does a great job. Obviously, most of the research is driven by horse racing and the funding that comes in through the different betting levy boards and stuff like that. Do you feel like something like that, or maybe it's not really known with sort of the equestrian disciplines, the show jumping, the dressage, even the Western disciplines? Like, yeah, if there was sport money behind it, you know what I mean? We might be able to make some sort of gains, that would benefit horses. Do you think that's just lacking? People just don't realize it, or?
Yeah, like, I think that it's just an exposure issue at this point, and that's why I think, like, the videos that you're doing, Jude, are going to be so valuable to the community. It's just about, like, exposing people to it. Like, this industry is full of incredibly ambitious people, incredibly intelligent people, and so it's just about, reaching out to them, letting them understand, like, what's available. Maybe someone has had an issue with their horse in the past with something related to nutrition, or, they felt that they were never really able to unlock the horse's full potential. Like, maybe they brought it over from Europe, they were super excited, and they just never really got what they wanted from the horse. And to think about, what else is out there to answer that question. I often think about, like, my own athletic journey, and not that it was super successful, but I think I did some things well, but I did a lot really poorly. And you reflect back on that and you say, like, oh, I wish I knew X, Y, and Z back then like I do now. And I would have trained completely differently, and I'm sure I would have been able to accomplish so much more. So I think it's just about, that constant reflection on, are we doing what's best for our horse today? Like, what else is out there? There's so many talented researchers around the globe doing some really cool research, and research that 100% does belong in the stable. And so we just need ways to get that information out there, whether it's through videos, podcasts, articles, social media, and then just start incorporating that. We're going to start to see improved, welfare and wellness in our horses. It's going to correlate to better performances in the ring, and then it's just going to continue to evolve and get better and better, as you say, just like the thoroughbred industry has done.